Welcome to Module 1 of Course 2, Cybersecurity Fundamentals. My name is Bayo Ido. In this module, we begin by diving straight into the core of any strong cybersecurity practice, which is risk management. Risk management is not just a checklist or a compliance item. It's the strategic heart of cybersecurity. It helps organizations understand which threats pose the greatest danger, which assets need the most protection, and how to allocate resources for maximum security impact. Think of it like planning defense in a game of chess. Every move is about anticipating threats and positioning your team to respond intelligently. Whether you are securing a hospital network, a retail payment system, or a cloud infrastructure, your ability to manage risk determines your resilience against attacks. By the end of this module, you would have learned the following items. Number 1, how to identify and categorize cybersecurity risks across various industries and operational areas. Number 2, the difference between external, internal, and emerging cyber threats, including real-world examples like APTs, which is Advanced Persistent Threats, and AI-driven ransomware. Number 3, how to apply risk assessment models like NIST SP 800-30, the FAIR model, and cyber risk matrices to evaluate threat likelihood and impact. And number 4, why risk from third parties and unpatched systems, like in the case of SolarWinds and Equifax breaches, why they must be part of your cybersecurity strategy. Number 5, the 4 main strategies to manage cyber risks, including avoidance, reduction, transfer, and acceptance, and how they apply in different contexts. Number 6, how to align industry-specific risk mitigation techniques with organizational goals in healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and tech sectors. And finally, how to build a resilient security posture by translating risk management into clear, actionable cybersecurity measures. So let's start by painting the big picture here, because understanding the cybersecurity risk landscape is not just about knowing what can go wrong. It's also about seeing the patterns, recognizing new threats, and making smart, proactive decisions to protect your systems, your data, and your people. So, what kinds of risk are we talking about here, really? First, we have external threats. These are attacks that originate from outside the organization. Think of hackers, ransomware groups, phishing campaigns, or even foreign cyber criminals that are trying to breach your defenses. Then there are internal threats. These come from within. It could be a disgruntled employee, or more often, a well-meaning staff member who makes a costly mistake, like clicking a malicious link or misconfiguring access rights. Next, we have emerging risks. These are the threats of tomorrow that are already taking shape today. And part of that would be AI-powered attacks that are becoming more intelligent. They are automating large-scale social engineering and malware deployment. We also have deepfakes. Deepfakes are being used to impersonate executives or even manipulate public opinion. And then there is quantum computing. While this is still emerging though, it could one day just render current encryption methods very obsolete. To tackle these risks effectively, we use cyber risk management frameworks that are structured approaches that guide us in assessing, mitigating, and monitoring risk. The 3 frameworks that we'll focus on here are, number 1, NIST Risk Management Framework, which is called NIST RMF. This is used heavily in US federal systems and critical infrastructure. And then we have the FAIR model, which is short for Factor Analysis of Information Risk, and it quantifies risk in financial terms. We also have the ISO 31000, which is a global standard for enterprise risk management across industries. So let's now explore how we identify and categorize cyber risks. We start by examining common threat types. Number 1 is Advanced Persistent Threat, which is APT. These are long-term stealthy attacks, often carried out by state-sponsored actors. They infiltrate networks and quietly extract data over time. There's also the ransomware 3.0. This new generation of ransomware adapts in real time. It uses AI to choose encryption strategies, evade detection, and escalate damage. There's also the cloud-based threats. And as organizations increasingly move to the cloud, attackers, they target misconfigurations and weak access controls to infiltrate cloud environments. And then we also have the insider threat. These are threats that come from employees or contractors who accidentally or perhaps intentionally compromise security. It's a real-world example. The SolarWinds supply chain attack of 2020, which involved malicious code inserted into a software update. Over 18,000 organizations downloaded the update, giving attackers access to sensitive systems. And what was the lesson learned? Risk assessment must always include evaluations of third-party vendors and supply chain partners. Now, let's look quickly at some risk categorization table. We're going to look at the risk category. I'll give you the description and perhaps even a couple of examples. And then the impact level and likelihood level is always usually determined by the organization depending on their environment. Let's look at strategic risks. These are risks that are affecting long-term goals and objectives. An example would be market competition and also regulatory changes. And then we have operational risks. These are risks that are arising from day-to-day operations. An example would be equipment failure, supply chain disruption, and so on. We also have the financial risks, and these are risks that are related to monetary loss or instability. Examples would be exchange rate fluctuation, credit risk, and so on. And then there is compliance risks, which are risks of violating laws and regulations. These ones can be very costly because they come with legal penalties and data privacy breaches. There's also the reputational risks. These are risks that damage the company's public image. And this could have negative media coverage and customer trust can be lost. Okay, so there's also cybersecurity risk, which are risks that are related to digital security threats. And examples could be data breaches, hacking, malware attacks, and so on. Also, we have environmental risks. These are risks from environmental factors, and this could come from natural disasters, pollution, regulations, etc. And like I mentioned before, the impact level or the likelihood could be high, medium, or low. And of course, you would have to determine that when you do your risk assessment to determine that this is something that is done internally by the organization to determine how impacted they've been and the likelihood of any of those risks happening. Let's look at the risk categorization table by industry. We're just going to look at just a few of them. So we have strategic risk, and to healthcare industry, this is like you're shifting to telemedicine or you're talking about regulatory changes along the way. And to the finance industry, this could come with market volatility or fintech disruption. And to the manufacturing industry, this could come with automation impact or global competition. And technology, we're talking about rapid innovation cycles or even AI ethics. Okay, so remember what I said. This is risk categorization by industry. This is how risk affects different categories like strategic risk that I just mentioned and how it affects industries across the board. So now we're looking at operational risks now. How do they affect healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and technology? That's what we're going to look at now. Under healthcare, it could be medical errors or patient data mishandling. In finance, it could be system failures, transaction errors, and so on. In manufacturing, it could be supply chain disruptions, machine breakdowns, and so on. And in technology, it could be server downtime or software bugs. We're going to look at maybe 2 or 3 more, and then we can jump to the next topic. So another one is financial risks, which is actually very important for any organization. Under healthcare, we could be looking at rising insurance costs, funding shortages, and so on. Under finance, it could be interest rate fluctuations and also credit risks. Under manufacturing, it could be raw material price hikes or labor costs. And under technology, it could be venture capital reliance or revenue instability. Let's look at two more. The compliance risk is very important and cybersecurity risk as well. So let's look at compliance risk. Under healthcare, it could be HIPAA violations or malpractice lawsuits or more. In finance, it could be anti-money laundering laws or SEC regulations. In manufacturing, it could be OSHA safety violations and environmental rules and so on. And in technology, it could be GDPR or data privacy laws, and that will be breaching those. And then we look at the very last one, which is cybersecurity risk. So in healthcare, we could be looking at risks like ransomware attacks on hospital systems. In finance, we could be looking at online banking fraud and identity theft. In manufacturing, we could be looking at intellectual property theft or hacking. And in technology, we could be looking at phishing attacks on cloud vulnerabilities. So now let's look at assessing cyber risks. So once risks are identified, we actually need to assess them. And that means determining two key things. Number one is how likely is it that this risk will happen? And that's the likelihood part of that. And then number two is how severe would the impact be if it did happen? And that's the impact part of that. So there are several models that we use to do this, but we're only just going to touch maybe three of them. Number one is NIST SP 800-30. This one offers both qualitative, which is like high, medium, low, because it's kind of subjective, and quantitative analysis methods. Quantitative because it's objective. And then we have the FAIR model, which focuses on financial quantification. So this is actually more objective because it focuses more on numbers, and it helps you to translate technical risk into dollars and cents. And then we have the cyber risk matrix, which plots risks into a grid of likelihood and impact. So this makes it easy for you to visualize priorities. Let's look at a real world example here. The Equifax data breach of 2017, which we've talked so much about in the very first course, it exposed sensitive data of 147 million people. And what was the root cause of this? An unpatched vulnerability. So ignoring small risks, like not updating a software patch, it can lead to massive consequences. So let's also now transition to cyber risk assessment framework and look at the framework and describe each of them, and then look at their key focus areas and what they are best for or what they are suitable for. We're just going to look at a few of them. There are a whole lot of them, but we'll look at the most popular ones. NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is called NIST CSF. It's a very flexible framework for managing cybersecurity risks, and its key focus areas are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And this is most suitable for the government. It was actually written by the government itself and for enterprises that have the need for it. We also have the ISO IEC 27001. This is an international standard for information security management. And the key focus areas are risk assessment, security controls, compliance, and so on. And it's suitable for global businesses and IT security. We also have the CIS controls, which is a set of cybersecurity best practices. This has a key focus area of basic, foundational, and organizational controls. And this is very suitable for SMEs and enterprises. SMEs meaning small and medium enterprises. And then we have PCI DSS, which is the security standard for payment card industry. And the key focus areas here are cardholder data protection and transaction security. And this is very best for retail, banking, and e-commerce sectors. And then we have the High Trust, which is the cybersecurity framework for healthcare. This focuses on risk management and HIPAA compliance. And this is suitable for healthcare organizations mostly. And finally, we have the SOC 2, which is the standard for managing customer data security. The key focus areas are security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. And this is suitable for cloud service providers and SaaS companies. So now let's look at some risk mitigation strategies, because after we assess risk, the next step is to decide what to do about them. This is where mitigation strategies come in. And here are 4 main approaches to risk mitigation. Okay. Number 1 is risk avoidance. This is where you eliminate the activity entirely. For example, if you are decommissioning outdated legacy systems because they are too vulnerable, either because they are not supported anymore by the vendor or it's been retired by you, that is risk avoidance. And then risk reduction would be to apply controls to reduce the risk. Examples would be to use controls like encryption, multi-factor authentication, firewalls, and patch management. And then risk transfer, which is the third one, is to shift the risk to a third party entirely. This could be through cyber insurance or outsourcing security operations to a trusted vendor. And what you're doing there is mostly you're shifting liability to a third party. And then we have the last one, which is risk acceptance. In some cases, organizations may just accept minor risks due to low impact or low likelihood. And because when they weigh it, they realize that it costs them more to want to fix that risk. So there's no point. So the one example here would be the Target data breach of 2013. And this happened because of poor third-party security. Hackers got in through an HVAC vendor. And what was the lesson learned? Vendor risk management and segmentation are essential part of your mitigation strategy. Now, let's take a little bite at cyber risk mitigation strategies and see how this works. We're going to look at some categories and then what the mitigation strategies should be and what the best practices should also be. We possibly are just going to look at a few of them. Let's look at this first category, which is the network security risks. The mitigation strategies here would be firewalls, intrusion detection system, and VPNs. And the best practice normally would be regular updates, access control, and monitoring. And then we look at endpoint security risks. Here, be sure you use antivirus software and also use endpoint detection response, which is the EDR. And then best practice would be to keep devices patched at all times and restrict admin access. If you're looking at the data security risk category, the best mitigation strategy here would be encryption, data loss prevention, and best practice would be to use strong encryption and restrict data access. Another category is identity and access risk. Best or mitigation strategies would be multi-factor authentication MFA and role-based access control RBAC. And best practices would be to enforce strong password policies and limit privileges. Let's look at one or two more. Let's look at cloud security risk. And the best strategy here would be to secure cloud configurations and use zero trust model. And best practices here would be to do regular security audits and encrypt cloud data. What about third-party supply chain risk? Here, the best mitigation here would be vendor risk assessment and contract security clauses. And best practices would be regular security reviews and enforce compliance standards. Also, compliance and regulatory risk, which is actually very important. Mitigation strategy here would be to adhere to GDPR, HIPAA, and PCI DSS. And best practices would be to continuously do compliance monitoring and legal reviews. And the last one is incident response and recovery. Here, mitigation strategies would be incident response plan, which is the IRP, and cyber insurance. Best practice would be to do regular testing of IRP, which is the incident response plans, and establish recovery protocols. So let's see how we can apply this to different industries. So we'll look at the category and then look at a few industries like healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and technology. So the very first category would be network security risk. Under healthcare, we use this to secure hospital networks and segment IoT medical devices. Under finance, best strategy would be to use firewalls and real-time fraud detection. Under manufacturing, secure ICS and SCADA networks. And under technology, please use Zero Trust Architecture, ZTA. Another category will be endpoint security risk. Under healthcare, please protect connected medical devices and use EDR tools. Under finance, secure trading platforms and use endpoint monitoring. Under manufacturing, secure industrial equipment and endpoint encryption. And under technology, secure workstations and automated patching. So we look at identity and access risk. Under healthcare, use role-based access for doctors and nurses and employ MFA. Under finance, use biometric authentication and MFA for transactions. And under manufacturing, secure employee credentials and zero trust identity. And under technology, use identity verification for users and employees. Let's look at the third-party and supply chain risk category. Under healthcare, you conduct vendor security assessment and secure data sharing. Under finance, vendor cybersecurity compliance audit is very important. And in manufacturing, third-party risk monitoring and secure IoT supply chain. And in technology, software supply chain security and code integrity checks are very important there. And the final one will be incident response and recovery. You will notice that I skipped just a couple of, maybe about 2 or 3. You can do a little research on them because of time. So in incident response and recovery category, under healthcare, please conduct or have disaster recovery plans and make sure you test it from time to time and have rapid cyber incident response. And then under finance, have financial breach response teams, and then cyber insurance. And under manufacturing, have industrial cybersecurity incident response teams. And in technology, make sure that you have red team testing or you conduct red team testing and business continuity planning. So what are the summary and the key takeaways here? We'll go to what we've learned in this module one after the other. Number 1, cyber risk management is essential for prioritizing threats and reducing harm. Number 2, techniques like NIST SP 800-30 and FAIR module, they help to evaluate likelihood and impact. Number 3, real-world breaches like SolarWinds, Equifax, and Target, they reveal the high cost of weak risk oversight. And number 4, strong risk mitigation includes a blend of technical controls, strategic planning, and third-party evaluation. And what are the next steps here? In the next module, we'll explore cybersecurity techniques to secure systems, networks, and data using real-world tools and configurations. And I can't really wait to see you there. Thank you.